The sky tears open above my wheat field, and I do not have time to be afraid yet. A streak of white fire cuts across the darkness, faster than any plane, faster than any falling star I have ever seen. It does not fade, it grows. I stand frozen by my truck, keys still in my hand, watching the light scream toward the earth like something that wants to hit me personally. Then it slams into the far end of my field, and the whole night shakes. Dust and burning wheat roll toward me in a wave of heat. I should run the other way. Any sane man would. Instead, I start walking toward the smoke, because some part of me already knows this is not a rock from space. Rocks do not slow down before they land. Rocks do not glow soft blue after the fire dies out. By the time I reach the crash site, the flames have burned themselves into embers, and I am standing in front of a pod. It is smaller than my truck, shaped like a teardrop, with a shell that looks like metal but shivers like liquid when the light hits it. Half of it is buried in scorched dirt. One panel on the side blinks with a slow, steady pulse, the only part of the thing that still seems alive. I press my hand against the warm hull and feel it hum, very faintly, like a heartbeat through a wall. I should call someone. I know I should. There is a landline in my kitchen and a sheriff 20 minutes down the road who would know exactly what to do with a fallen object like this. But my legs do not carry me back to the house. They carry me around the pod, searching for a way in, until my fingers catch the edge of a seam that was not there a moment ago. The hull splits open on its own, folding back like a flower closing in reverse, and steam rolls out into the cold night air. Inside, wrapped in a silver material that looks woven from moonlight, is a baby. Not a human baby. Her skin carries a soft violet undertone, faint as a bruise healing, and beneath the thin fabric at her chest, I can see the shape of not one, but two small heartbeats, ticking side by side. Her eyes are closed, but when they open a second later, they are gold, deep and liquid, like something poured rather than grown. She looks at me, and she starts to cry. It is, without any doubt, the most human sound I have ever heard. I do not think. I simply reach in and lift her out of that pod, and she is warm, and she is light, and she curls her small hand around my finger the exact same way my own daughter did, years ago, before the fever took her and left this house too quiet to bear. I stand there in a smoking field at 2 in the morning, holding a child that fell out of the sky, and something inside my chest that has been closed for 3 years creaks open like a door I forgot existed. Behind me, the pod begins to dim. Its systems, whatever they were, are finally giving out. I glance back once and see, carved faintly into the inside of the hull, a symbol I do not recognize. 3 curved lines wrapping around a circle, like a crown drawn by someone who had never seen one, only imagined it. I do not know what it means. I only know it feels important, and I know I am not going to leave this child alone in a burned field to wait for men with badges and clipboards to decide what she is. I carry her back to the house through the wheat, her cries settling into small hiccups against my shoulder, and every step I take away from that pod is a step I cannot undo. Inside, I lay her on the kitchen table under the light and just look at her. She is small enough to fit in a laundry basket, with a thin covering of fine violet down instead of hair, and fingers that end in nails slightly too sharp to be ordinary. She should terrify me. Instead, I find myself checking that she is warm enough, that she is breathing right, the same instincts that never really left me, even after 3 years of an empty crib in the back room. I know there are proper channels for something like this. Somewhere, a government agency has a protocol for finding a fallen ship in a farmer's field. Men in unmarked vehicles would arrive within hours, and this child would disappear into a facility with a number instead of a name, studied instead of raised. I have seen enough news reports about strange lights and strange silences afterward to believe that much. I look at her fingers curled around mine, and I make the only decision that feels like it belongs to me that night. I am not calling anyone. I do not have a plan beyond that first choice. I only have an old house too big for one man, A barn full of tools, fields that need tending, and a hollow place in my chest shaped exactly like a child. Whatever she is, wherever she came from, whoever might come looking for her eventually, tonight she is simply a baby who has no one else, and I am simply a man who has room for one more heartbeat in this quiet life. I warm a bottle of milk, unsure if it is even the right thing to give her, and she drinks it anyway, greedily, both her small hearts working hard enough that I can feel them through her chest when I hold her close. Somewhere out past the tree line, the crash site glows faintly one last time, and then goes dark, as if the sky itself is closing the door behind her. I sit in the old rocking chair that used to belong to my wife, the one I never had the heart to move, and I rock this strange golden-eyed child until her cries fade completely into sleep. The house creaks the way old houses do, settling around us, and for the first time in 3 years, it does not feel like a house holding on to grief. It feels like a house holding on to a beginning. I do not know her name yet. I do not know her language, her people, or the reason a pod like that would fall from a sky that should have been empty. I only know that somewhere far away, on a night none of us understand yet, a story that began in fire and silence has just landed in my arms, and I have already chosen to keep it. Before dawn breaks, I carry her into the small back room that has stood empty for 3 years, the one with a crib I never had the strength to take apart. I set her down inside it, and she fits, as if the room had been waiting the whole time for someone to fill it again. I stand over her a long while, watching her twin heartbeats rise and fall beneath violet skin, watching her golden eyes flutter with dreams I cannot begin to guess at. I think of my late wife, the woman who chose the name that never got used, and I decide, right there in the gray light before sunrise, that the name belongs to this child instead, Illyra. It feels right in my mouth, soft and steady, the kind of name that can carry a person through a hard life. I whisper it to her once, testing it, and though she is fast asleep, her small hand twitches around my finger as if she already knows it is hers. I do not know yet what I have brought into this house. I do not know what will come looking for her, or when, or what it will cost me to have kept her a secret this long. All I know, standing in that gray morning light with a sleeping alien child in a dead daughter's crib, is that I have made a promise I intend to keep, no matter what walks out of the sky to challenge it. The sun rises over my burned field an hour later, and by the time the light reaches the windows of that back room, I am already a father again. 15 years pass the way water moves over stone, slow enough that you barely notice the shape of things changing, until one day you look up and everything is different. I remember Illyra's first word, though it was not really a word at all, not one I understood at the time. She was barely a year old, sitting in her high chair while I cooked eggs at the stove, and she suddenly said something soft and flowing, 3 syllables that rose and fell like a small song. I turned around, startled, thinking she had somehow learned to say a name. She said it again, patient with me, the way babies rarely are, as if she were teaching a slow student. It would be years before I understood, with a chill down my spine, that the sounds she made that morning belonged to no language spoken on this earth, and that she had been speaking it in her sleep for months before that, murmuring it into her blankets, like a lullaby someone else had once sung to her. I never told anyone about that morning. I never told anyone about most mornings like it. She grew fast, faster than I expected, though slow enough that I could tell myself it was simply healthy eating and good country air. By 3, she was climbing the fence posts around the pasture like they were nothing. By 5, she fell from the hayloft, and I ran to her certain I would find broken bones, only to find her sitting up, confused by my panic, with nothing more than a scrape that had already stopped bleeding by the time I reached her. I told the doctor in town it must have been a smaller fall than I thought. I told myself the same thing every time it happened again. The animals noticed her before the neighbors did. Our old dog, who barked at every stranger who came up the drive, would go completely silent and still whenever Illyra toddled close, watching her with the kind of careful respect dogs usually reserve for creatures far larger than themselves. The barn cats, wild and untouchable to everyone else, would curl against her ankles in the sun. I used to joke that she had some kind of gift with animals. Some nights, watching her sit motionless in the grass with a hawk circling low overhead, close enough that I could see its eyes tracking her, I stopped thinking it was a joke at all. School was harder. I had prepared for questions about her skin, her eyes, the faint markings that sometimes appeared along her collarbone when she was upset, like ink rising to the surface of water. I told people her mother's family carried a rare condition, and most were kind enough, or polite enough, not to push further. Children were not always so kind. I remember the year she came home with her knuckles scraped, refusing to explain, until her teacher called to tell me Elira had stood up to 3 older boys who had cornered a smaller child by the buses, and had not backed down even when they turned on her instead. I was angry at first, the way any father would be, until I saw her that night sitting on the porch steps, staring at her own hands like she did not recognize them. I did not do anything wrong, she told me, but it felt like something else did it. Not me. I sat beside her and told her that standing up for someone smaller was never wrong, no matter whose hands did the standing. She leaned her head against my shoulder, and for a while neither of us said anything else, and that was enough. She asked me for the first time that same year why her skin did not match mine. I had rehearsed an answer for that question 100 times in my head over the years, and every version I had prepared abandoned me the moment her golden eyes turned up to meet mine. I told her the truth, or the closest thing to it that I understood. I told her she came to me in a way most children do not, falling from a sky full of fire, and that whatever world she came from, whatever family she might have been born to, none of it changed the fact that she was my daughter the moment I lifted her out of that broken pod. She was quiet for a long time after that. Then she asked if I thought her real family was looking for her. I did not have an answer that would not frighten either of us, so I told her the only thing I knew for certain. Wherever they are, I said, they would be proud of who you have become. She never asked again after that night, but I noticed she started drawing. At first, the drawings looked like any child's scribbles, animals and houses, and stick-figure versions of the 2 of us standing in the wheat field. But by the time she was 8, a pattern began appearing in the margins of every notebook I found around the house. 3 curved lines circling a single point, over and over, drawn with a focus that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than idle habit. I recognized it instantly, though I never told her why. It was the same symbol carved into the inside of the pod that had once carried her here, the one I had buried myself, years earlier, deep in the far corner of the property where I hoped no one would ever dig it up. I asked her once, gently, why she liked drawing that shape so much. She looked at the paper for a long moment before answering, her voice quieter than usual. I do not know, she said. It feels like it belongs to me, like I am supposed to remember what it means, but I cannot. The dreams started around the same time. She would wake some nights breathing hard, describing a sky the color of dried blood, a throne carved from black stone, voices speaking in that same flowing language she had once murmured as a baby. I would sit with her until the shaking stopped, telling her it was only a dream, though some nights I wondered if I was lying to both of us. There were mornings I woke to find her standing at her window, staring east, as if she could feel something out there that I could not. Despite all of it, most of our life together was ordinary, and I clung to that ordinary life like a rope thrown into deep water. I taught her to fish at the creek behind the property, and she caught her first trout at 9 years old with a patience that put me to shame. I taught her to drive the old truck around the back pasture 2 years before the law would have allowed it anywhere near a real road, and she took to it with a natural steadiness that made my chest ache with pride. We spent evenings on the porch while I told her stories about her mother, a woman she never met but somehow still carried pieces of, in the stubborn set of her jaw and the way she refused to let an argument go unfinished. The first time she called me Dad, rather than by my name, I nearly dropped the plate I was carrying. She was 6, sitting at the kitchen table with her legs swinging beneath her chair, asking, without any weight in her voice, whether Dad could help her with her reading homework. I had to turn away and pretend to busy myself at the sink so she would not see my eyes go wet. It was such a small word to carry so much. I had spent years being careful not to assume the title, never certain whether someday her real family, whoever or wherever they were, might come to claim it back from me. Hearing her choose it on her own, without hesitation, felt like being handed something I had been too afraid to ask for. By the time she turned 13, the changes had become harder to explain away. Her strength outpaced any ordinary teenager's. She could lift the back end of the old truck enough for me to change a tire without a jack, laughing at my astonished face like it was nothing at all. Her senses sharpened in ways that unsettled even me, catching the sound of a truck engine on the main road minutes before I could hear it, smelling rain long before the clouds gathered overhead. She started asking harder questions too, no longer satisfied with soft answers about falling from the sky. She wanted to know what kind of ship it had been, what the symbol on it meant, whether I thought her birth parents were still alive somewhere among the stars. I did not have those answers. I never had. All I had was 15 years of proof that whatever she had been born as, she had grown into someone kind, someone stubborn, someone who checked on injured animals before she checked on herself, someone who still, even at 15, curled up beside me on the porch some evenings, the way she had as a small child, needing nothing more than my arm around her shoulders and the quiet of the fields around us. It was on one of those evenings, the summer she turned 15, that she finally asked the question I had been dreading since the night I pulled her out of that pod. We were sitting on the porch steps, the sky turning orange behind the tree line, the same tree line that had once lit up with fire the night she arrived. She was quiet for a long while, tracing the familiar curved symbol into the wood of the step with her fingernail, before she finally spoke. "Dad," she said, her voice steadier than I expected, "what if someone comes looking for me?" I looked at her, this child I had raised from a crash landing into a young woman who could outlift me, outrun me, and somehow still needed me the same way she had the very first night. I did not have an answer that would satisfy either of us. I only had 15 years of loving her exactly as she was, and a growing, uneasy certainty that the quiet life we had built together was not going to last much longer. "I am here," I told her, because it was the only truth I trusted myself to say out loud. "Whatever comes, I am here." She nodded slowly, resting her head against my shoulder the way she used to as a small child, and neither of us spoke again as the sun finished setting behind the field where it had all begun. Neither of us knew yet how soon that promise would be tested. The morning it happens, the sky does not warn me the way it did 15 years earlier. There is no streak of fire, no distant roar building toward impact. Instead, there is only silence. A silence so complete that it wakes me before dawn, before the rooster, before even the birds, who have gone utterly still in the trees around the house. I step onto the porch in bare feet and find the whole world holding its breath. No wind moves the wheat, no insects hum in the grass. Even the old dog, curled by the door, lifts his head and stares east without a single bark, ears flat against his skull. Then the light begins. It starts as a faint shimmer along the horizon, like heat rising off summer pavement, except it is barely past dawn and the air is cool enough to fog my breath. The shimmer spreads, stretching wide across the sky in a way that has nothing to do with weather. I have seen storm fronts roll in my whole life, seen tornadoes drop out of green skies, seen every kind of sunrise this land has to offer. I have never seen anything like this. Alira appears in the doorway behind me, before I can call for her, already dressed, already still, staring at the same horizon with an expression I have never seen on her face before. Not fear, recognition. "Get inside," I tell her, my voice rougher than I intend. She does not move. "Alira." "I do not know this," she says quietly, "but I feel like I am supposed to." The shimmer resolves into shapes, and the shapes become ships. Though calling them ships feels wrong the moment I see them properly. They are too large, too smooth, too silent for anything that should be able to fly. They do not roar the way jets do. They do not thrum with engines the way anything built by human hands would. They simply hang in the sky, dozens of them, arranged in a formation too precise to be anything but deliberate, and they begin descending toward my farm with the unhurried certainty of something that has never once doubted it would arrive exactly where it intended. I grab Alira's arm, and for the first time in years, she does not resist me pulling her back toward the house. We stand together at the window as the ships lower themselves over the wheat field, over the exact spot where a much smaller pod once burned a crater into the earth. The wheat flattens beneath some invisible pressure pushing down from above, and I think absurdly of that first night, of carrying a crying infant back through this same field, of believing then that I could keep this a secret between the two of us forever. I was wrong. I understand that now, watching an entire fleet arrive with the patience of something that had never been in any real hurry, because it always knew exactly where to look eventually. My phone buzzes uselessly in my pocket. No signal, no bars, nothing but a black screen. I glance out the window and see town lights flickering in the distance, some going out entirely. Whatever technology moves those ships, it seems to swallow every other signal within reach. We should hide, I say, though even as the words leave my mouth, I know they are useless. 15 years of hiding brought us exactly to this doorstep, and I do not believe another hour of it will change anything now. Alira turns to look at me, and there is something steady in her golden eyes that was not there the night before, something that makes her look older than 15, older than any child should look. "I do not think I want to hide anymore," she says. Before I can answer her, a sound rolls across the field, low and resonant, felt more in the chest than heard through the ears. The largest of the ships settles fully onto the ground, crushing a wide circle of wheat beneath it, and a seam of light appears along its underside, widening slowly into an opening large enough to drive a truck through. I step outside despite every instinct screaming at me to stay behind locked doors, because whatever is about to walk out of that opening, I refuse to let my daughter face it alone, and I refuse to let her think for even a moment that I would choose to hide rather than stand beside her. She follows me onto the porch, and together we watch as the first figures emerge from the ship. They move in perfect formation, armor-plated in a deep shifting color that seems to change from black to violet depending on the angle of the early light. Faces hidden behind smooth visors that reflect the field back at us like dark water. They do not carry weapons the way soldiers back on Earth would, no visible rifles or blades, yet something about the precision of their movement makes it clear that they do not need visible weapons to be dangerous. They form two lines stretching from the ship toward my porch, a corridor of silent armored figures, dozens of them, standing utterly motionless the moment their formation completes. I count them without meaning to. 40, at least, maybe more emerging from the other ships still descending behind the first. My hand finds Alira's shoulder, less to protect her, I realize, and more because I need to feel that she is still there, still real, still mine for a few more minutes, before whatever happens next takes that certainty away. A figure steps out of the ship last, and the moment she does, every armored soldier in that corridor lowers their head in unison, a wave of motion rippling down the two lines like wind through the wheat. She is tall, taller than any of the soldiers around her, dressed not in armor but in flowing dark fabric that seems to drink in the early light rather than reflect it. Her skin carries the same violet undertone as Alira's, deeper, more pronounced, and her eyes, when she lifts her head to look across the field toward my porch, are the exact same shade of liquid gold. A crown rests on her brow, simple in design but unmistakable in purpose, 3 curved lines circling a single point at its center. The same symbol Alira has drawn in the margins of every notebook since she was 8 years old. I feel Alira go very still beside me, her breath catching audibly, and I understand in that moment that some part of her, some buried piece of memory or instinct she never fully understood, recognizes what the rest of us are only just now seeing confirmed. The woman begins walking down the corridor of soldiers, unhurried, each footstep landing with a quiet certainty that makes the flattened wheat seem to part slightly ahead of her, though I cannot tell if that is real or simply my imagination struggling to process what I am watching. The soldiers remain bowed as she passes. None of them move to stop her. None of them move at all, until she reaches the end of the corridor and stops at the edge of my yard, close enough now that I can see the fine detail of the crown, the age in her eyes that her unlined face does not otherwise show, and the way those golden eyes fix themselves entirely on the girl standing beside me and do not move away again. For a long moment, nobody speaks. The wind that had vanished earlier seems to hold itself back still, as if even the air understands the weight of what is happening in this ordinary farmyard that has somehow become the center of something far larger than any of us. I feel Alira's hand find mine, gripping tightly the way she used to as a small child crossing a busy street, and something about that small, human gesture steadies me more than anything else could have in that moment. The woman studies her for a long while, something unreadable moving behind those ancient eyes, before she finally speaks, her voice carrying across the yard without seeming to rise in volume at all, as though the silence itself was built to carry her words exactly as far as she wanted them to go. "Do you know who you are, child?" The question hangs in the still morning air, and I feel Alira's grip on my hand tighten, and I realize, standing there on the porch of the only home she has ever known, that neither of us has any idea how to answer it. Alira does not answer right away, and in the silence that follows, I feel every one of those 40 armored figures watching us with the patience of people who have waited far longer than one uncomfortable minute for this moment to arrive. "I am Alira," she finally says, her voice steadier than I expected, given the way her hand still grips mine. "That is who I am." Something shifts behind the woman's golden eyes, not quite a smile, not quite sorrow, something caught between the two. She takes another step closer, close enough now that I can see fine markings along her collarbone, the same kind that rise on Alira's skin whenever she grows upset, except on this woman they seem permanent, etched rather than surfacing. "That is the name given to you by the man who raised you," the woman says, her gaze flicking briefly to me before returning to Alira. "It is not the name you were born with." I step forward slightly, placing myself a half pace in front of my daughter without fully deciding to do it. Whatever authority radiates from this woman, whatever weight her presence carries, I have spent 15 years standing between Alira and anything that threatened to take her from me, and old habits do not break simply because the threat now arrives with an armored escort. "You have a lot of explaining to do before anyone gets to decide what she should be called," I say, and my voice comes out steadier than I feel. The woman's attention shifts fully onto me now, and for a moment I feel the full weight of eyes that have clearly commanded far more than one farmhouse in their long life. Then, unexpectedly, something almost like respect flickers across her expression. "You are the one who found her," she says. "It is not a question." 15 years ago," I answer, "in a field not far from where your ship just landed. I have raised her every day since." The woman studies me for a long moment, and behind her, I notice several of the armored soldiers shift slightly, an almost imperceptible reaction, as though my answer carries more weight among them than I understand. Finally, the woman inclines her head, the barest fraction of a bow, an acknowledgement I did not expect from someone who commands an entire fleet. "Then you have done what an entire empire failed to do for 15 years, she says. "You kept her safe." I feel some of the tension in my shoulders ease, though not all of it, not with dozens of soldiers still standing in formation across my flattened wheat field. Alira steps up beside me now, no longer hiding behind my shoulder, her chin lifted in a way that reminds me painfully of her first day standing up to those boys by the school bus, refusing to back down even when she did not fully understand what she was standing against. "Who are you?" she asks, "and who do you say I was born to be?" The woman's eyes soften, just slightly, at the directness of the question, and for the first time since stepping off that ship, she looks less like a ruler addressing a subject, and more like someone standing before a memory she thought she had lost. "My name is Vesa," she says. "I served your mother, and before that, your grandmother, as they each ruled our world in turn. I am the one who placed you into that pod myself, 15 years ago, on the worst night of my life, and I have searched every fallen trajectory across 100 systems since, hoping I would someday find you exactly like this. Alive, grown, standing before me. The field falls silent again, the only sound the faint creak of the ship's hull settling behind her, and I feel Alira's hand slip out of mine for the first time since the ships arrived, though she does not step away from me. She simply stands a little taller, absorbing words that must feel like the answer to every question she has carried quietly for 15 years, every dream of a red sky, every symbol drawn without knowing why. "You said the worst night of your life," Alira says. "What happened?" Vesa's expression darkens, and for a moment, the composed ruler standing in my yard looks simply like a woman remembering something she has never fully recovered from. "Your family was betrayed," she says. "A rebellion within our own court seized the throne in a single night, and every member of the royal bloodline was hunted down before dawn. Your mother placed you into an escape pod with her own hands and sent you into the stars alone, trusting fate more than she trusted anyone left standing in our halls. I promised her, as the ship carrying you vanished into the dark, that I would not stop searching until I found you again. I feel the weight of that story settle over the yard like a second dawn, and beside me, Alira's breathing has gone unsteady in a way I have not heard since she was very small. "Am I the only one left?" she asks quietly. "You are the last of your bloodline," Vesa confirms, "which makes you, whether you feel ready for it or not, the rightful heir to a throne that has waited 15 years for someone worthy to reclaim it." I feel my stomach drop at those words, understanding immediately where this conversation is heading, and I step forward again, this time with less caution and more of the stubbornness that has carried me through 15 years of raising a child the whole universe apparently wanted found. "She is 15 years old," I say. "She has a home. She has a life. Whatever throne you are talking about will still exist next year, or the year after that, once she has had time to understand any of this." Vesa's gaze returns to me, and this time there is a flicker of something sharper in it, though not unkind. "The Empire does not offer patience the way a farmhouse does," she says. "There are factions who would move against her the moment word spreads that the heir has been found. Every day she remains outside protection is another day she remains at risk. Then protect her here," I answer immediately, surprising myself with how quickly the words come. "You found her. You know she is safe. Nothing forces her to walk onto that ship today." The armored soldiers along the corridor shift again at my words, murmurs passing between them in that same flowing language Alira once spoke as an infant, and I realize, watching their reaction, that no one has spoken to Vesa this way in a very long time. Vesa studies me for a long, silent moment, something calculating behind her golden eyes, before she finally turns her attention back to Alira. "What do you want, child?" she asks. "Not what duty demands, not what your bloodline requires. What do you actually want?" Alira looks between the two of us, the Empress who carries the memory of a mother she never knew, and the man who has spent 15 years being the only father she has ever needed, and for the first time since the ships descended, I see real uncertainty cross her face. "I do not know yet," she finally admits. "But I know I am not ready to choose between the two of you standing here in a field before breakfast." A ripple of something passes through the gathered soldiers at that answer, and even Vesa's composed expression cracks slightly, something almost like the beginning of a smile pulling at the corner of her mouth, quickly smoothed away again. "Then we will not force a choice before breakfast," she says, and for the first time since stepping off that ship, her voice carries something closer to warmth than command. "But a choice will need to be made, and soon. The Empire will not remain patient forever, and neither, I suspect, will the ones who tried to erase your bloodline the night you were born." I feel Alira's hand find mine again, gripping it the way she has since she was small enough to fit in one arm, and I understand, standing there in the wreckage of my flattened wheat field, that whatever life we built together over 15 quiet years has just become the opening chapter of something far larger than either of us ever expected to carry. We stand together on the porch a while longer, watching the soldiers hold their formation without complaint, without impatience, as though they have all the time in existence to wait for an answer neither Alira nor I are ready to give, and somewhere behind Vessa's composed golden eyes I catch a glimpse of the same fierce protectiveness I have carried for 15 years, aimed now, unmistakably, at the same girl standing beside me. Vessa does not press for an answer that morning, and for that small mercy I find myself grateful in a way I did not expect to feel toward a woman who arrived with an armored fleet and the power to take my daughter away without asking permission from anyone. Instead, she asks if she and a small number of her guard might remain on the property while Alira decides what she wants, rather than forcing the decision under threat of departure. I agree. Mostly because refusing seems unlikely to change the outcome, and partly because something in the way Vessa watches Alira convinces me that her patience, however unfamiliar it looks on someone who commands an empire, is genuine. The following days settle into an uneasy rhythm. The bulk of the fleet withdraws to hold position somewhere beyond the atmosphere, out of sight of the town down the road, though I have no illusions that their absence from view means their absence from watching. A handful of soldiers remain stationed quietly near the tree line, careful not to trample any more of the field than necessary, while Vessa herself takes to walking the property each morning, sometimes alone, sometimes with Alira beside her, speaking in low voices about a world neither of us has ever seen. I watch this happen with a complicated ache in my chest. Every conversation between them, every piece of history Vessa shares about a mother Alira never knew, about a homeworld with skies the color of dried roses and structures built from something like living stone, feels like watching a door open onto a life I can never give her myself. And yet, every evening, without fail, Alira returns to the porch and sits beside me, exactly as she always has, resting her head against my shoulder while the sun sets, as though the weight of an empire has not changed anything about the two of us at all. On the third evening, I ask her directly what she is thinking, unwilling to let the question sit between us unspoken any longer. "I keep waiting to feel like I belong there," she admits, staring out at the field where the ships first landed. "Vessa tells me stories about my mother, and I want to feel something when she does, some kind of memory or pull toward that world. But mostly, I just feel like a stranger, being told about someone else's daughter. And here, I ask carefully, do you feel like a stranger here too?" She shakes her head immediately, without hesitation. "Here, I feel like your daughter. That has never once felt uncertain, not for a single day of my life. I do not tell her what to choose that night, though every instinct in me wants to. I have spent 15 years teaching her to stand on her own, to make her own decisions even when they scared her, and I am not about to take that away from her now simply because the decision in front of her happens to be larger than any she has faced before." On the fifth day, Vessa asks to speak with me alone, away from Alira, and I agree, though not without a flicker of old suspicion. We walk to the edge of the burned crater where the original pod first landed 15 years ago, the scar in the earth still faintly visible beneath years of regrown grass, and Vessa stops there, staring down at the ground as though she can still see the moment it happened. "I did not expect to find her raised by someone like you," she says finally. "I imagined, if she survived at all, that she would be discovered by scientists, or worse, by those who would see only a weapon or a curiosity rather than a child. I did not imagine a farmer with an empty crib and enough love to spare for something the universe delivered to his doorstep in fire. I do not know what to say to that, so I say nothing, and Vesa continues. I have spent 15 years believing that finding her would be the end of my search, she admits. I did not consider what it would mean to find her already loved, already raised, already someone whole, rather than someone waiting to be shaped into whatever the Empire required of her. You have made this far more complicated than I expected, and far more right than I deserve credit for guessing. I finally find my voice. I am not going to pretend I want her to leave, I tell Vesa honestly, but I also understand I cannot protect her from everything her birth made her responsible for. If she chooses that throne, I will not stand in her way. I only ask that whatever happens, she gets to choose it herself, without either of us deciding for her. Vesa studies me for a long moment, something like genuine respect settling into her expression for the first time since she stepped off that ship. That is more wisdom than most in my court would offer, she says quietly. Perhaps you have taught her more about ruling than either of us realizes. On the 7th morning, Elira finds me in the barn, repairing a fence post the way I have every summer for 15 years, and she stands in the doorway for a long moment before speaking. I think I know what I want, she says. I set down my tools and give her my full attention, my heart hammering harder than I expect, given how calm her voice sounds. Tell me, I say. I do not want to choose between being her heir and being your daughter, Elira says, her chin lifting the same stubborn way it has since the day she stood up to those boys at school. I want both. I want to learn what I am supposed to be out there, but I am not doing it by disappearing from here. Whatever throne is waiting for me, it does not get to erase the 15 years you gave me first. Relief and pride tangle together so tightly in my chest that for a moment I cannot speak at all. When I finally find my voice, it comes out rougher than I intend. Then that is exactly who you should be, I tell her. Not one or the other, both, on your own terms. She smiles then, the first real smile I have seen from her since the ships arrived, and for a moment she looks exactly like the small child who once fell asleep in my arms in a smoking field, utterly certain that whatever came next, she would not be facing it alone. Together, we walk out of the barn to find Vesa waiting near the porch, and Elira delivers her answer with a steadiness that makes me prouder than almost anything I have witnessed in 15 years of watching her grow. I will come with you, she tells Vesa. I will learn what I need to learn, and I will accept whatever responsibility comes with my bloodline. But Earth does not lose me because of it, and neither does he. If you want an heir who understands duty, you also get an heir who understands loyalty, because he is the reason I know what that word means at all. Vesa listens to every word without interruption, and when Elira finishes, something shifts visibly in the Empress's posture, a formality dropping away, replaced by something closer to genuine warmth. Then let it be known, Vesa says, her voice carrying easily across the yard toward the waiting soldiers, that this world and this man stand under the protection of the heir to the throne. From this day forward, no fleet moves against this place without answering to her directly, and by extension, to me. I feel something in my chest loosen that has been tight since the moment those ships first appeared on the horizon, and beside me, Elira reaches for my hand one more time, holding it the way she has held it through every storm since she was small enough to be carried through a burning field. Over the following weeks, arrangements are made that I could never have imagined preparing for. Elira will divide her time, spending stretches of months, learning what it means to be heir to a world I will likely never see myself, and returning here, between each stretch, to the fields and the porch and the fishing creek that raised her long before any crown found her. Vesa, true to her word, ensures that our small corner of the world remains untouched, protected quietly and without interference by forces far beyond anything the town down the road could ever imagine watching over it. The day Alira leaves for the first time, she stands beside the ship in the same flattened patch of field where it first landed, and instead of the fear I expected to feel, I find myself simply proud, watching a young woman step toward a destiny she chose entirely for herself, rather than one chosen for her by either an empire or a farmer. "I will call," she tells me, exactly the way any ordinary daughter would say it before leaving for school in a distant city, "and I will come home for the harvest, no matter what." I hold her one last time before she boards, the same way I held her the very first night I found her, and I feel both of her heartbeats steady and strong against my chest. "I told you 15 years ago that I would keep you safe," I tell her quietly. I did not know back then that keeping that promise would end up meaning I had to help protect an empire too. She laughs, the sound bright and familiar despite everything that has changed around us, and pulls back just far enough to look me in the eyes one more time before turning toward the ship. "Then I suppose we are both learning as we go," she says. I watch her walk up the ramp and disappear into the ship alongside Vesa, and I stand in that field long after the vessel lifts silently into the sky and vanishes among the clouds. The same way I once stood over a smoking crater 15 years earlier, uncertain of everything except one simple, unshakable fact. Whatever she becomes out there among the stars, wherever her bloodline eventually carries her, she will always come home to this field first, because home was never about where she was born. It was about who chose to keep her. And on the nights when the sky above this old farmhouse glows faintly, right before her ship descends for another visit, I still walk out to meet her exactly the way I did that very first night, ready to catch whatever falls out of the dark and into my arms, no matter what shape it takes or what title it carries, because to me, she has only ever been, and will always be, simply my daughter.